So this is a passage from the book of Mark. And it's from the 10th chapter, it starts at verse 46, the healing of blind Bartimaeus. They came to Jericho. As he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout and say, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "My teacher, let me see again." Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the way. I quite like the Gospel of Mark for a couple of reasons. First of all, it is really, and this is the primary one I'll get into here, it's really spooky. If you read the Gospel of Mark, it's full of extremely weird miracles where Jesus performs fantastic healing. It's also haunted by demons and possession and very real evil. The Gospel of Mark famously ends, although there's a later edition, with kind of silence and fear when the women find the empty tomb. Although, like I said, there's a later edition with his ascension and his appearance. And so I want to situate this in the context of this gospel that's very much haunted by the historic events that happened right before its writing. The destruction of the temple, the sort of horrific Roman attacks against the Jews. And to state that this is one of many miracles that Jesus performs in this sort of haunted world. A world that, much like our own, is racked by sin and terror and fallenness and death. And so in this, we have Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, and he's a blind beggar. Back then, there weren't schools for the blind, there weren't social services and social security. There were not ways in which people with disabilities were integrated into society that we have, thankfully, and through much struggle, developed now. And so almost certainly for the entire time in which he was blind, Bartimaeus has been a beggar. He sits by the roadside and he asks passersby for coin. But even though he is blind, he recognizes when Jesus passes that this is the Son of David and that he has the power to make him whole. We don't know necessarily that he ever heard Jesus teach, although he calls him my teacher. But he cries out, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many order him to be quiet. Think about this. Think about a beggar accosting this man and his followers, saying, "Have mercy on me," in particular, me, a beggar, a blind beggar. But instead of listening to them and being quiet, he continues to cry out, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus listens. He calls him there. He tells the disciples to call him there. And Bartimaeus throws off his cloak and comes to Jesus. And Jesus asks him, "What do you want?" And he says, "My teacher, let me see again." He has faith in that moment that Jesus can heal his blindness and bring his sight back. And Jesus responds to that faith, saying, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately, he regained his sight and followed him on the way, the scripture says. In some ways, I think that this is a neat encapsulation of our faith and of our understanding as Lutherans, that we are saved not through our own works, but by grace through faith. Or by faith through grace. It's not that the blind man follows Jesus and then is made whole. It is that he calls out to Jesus for his healing, is healed, and then follows him. Jesus' healing is a response to the man's faith. It is not a response to anything that the man does. any good works that he can perform, any goodness that he can assume by following Jesus on his travels. It is just by him crying out and saying, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Sometimes when we read scripture, it's helpful to imagine ourselves in a devotional context as one of the characters in the story. And this story, in fact, in any story, when we see people calling on Jesus to heal them, to make them whole, to deliver them from whatever they are suffering, it's appropriate to see ourselves in this stead, to see ourselves as this blind beggar who has nothing at all, but who recognizes the Son of God before him and who says, have mercy on me. Let me see again, my teacher. And whose faith can be met with the limitless grace of God, with God's love and with God's power to make us whole and to convert us into his followers. That's what I'm thinking about today. The next thing that happens in this gospel is Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, and then, of course, his crucifixion, death, and resurrection. But on the way to Jerusalem, after he left Jericho, he meets a beggar who accompanies him for the rest of that journey.